everybody. It's good to be here. My name is Maud, and I'm a developer relations engineer on the Google Chrome team for security and privacy, on the web specifically. I live in Berlin, Germany, and I love water sports and traveling, just like many of us. And just like many of us here, hopefully, I also love building web applications. And what I would like to do today is to go on a little trip with you to share what I've learned about web privacy and security when building web applications. And before we do that, I would like to talk about cinnamon buns. Very important topic here, I know. I know there are two types actually, at least I was told yesterday. Cinnamon, cardamom, and probably more. I still need to try this. But so it's my first time in Stockholm, and yesterday I had a little bit of time, so I took a stroll in the city where it was still daylight, and I saw these for the first time. So they look really delicious, and they were like nicely disposed in this little shop window. So I stopped and looked, right? But the thing is, I don't know if you can see on the picture because I took a different angle, but right behind these, there's actually a row of chairs that are kind of facing the street, which meant that when I was stopping and looking, I was kind of really directly facing people who were just looking to have a nice time and not being disturbed by tourists who were excited about cinnamon buns. So, I thought it was interesting because there was this nice user experience for the passerbys like me, but for people sitting inside, it could feel a little bit privacy invasive, I felt. So, this is just a cinnamon bun shop. But in reality, what I've observed yesterday is something we can also see on the web, I think. Because user experience and privacy are actually deeply, deeply connected. The privacy decisions we take and we make as developers can have very, very real and direct impacts on the user experience of people using your services. So this is kind of what I would like to share with you today. And before I dive in, I kind of want to share that when I started working in the web space, I was mostly front-end focused, and then I did a little bit of full stack. But initially, for me, privacy and security, it looked a little bit boring. It was important for me as a user, but I think as an engineer, I had this view that, okay, what do you have? You have a cookie banner. What is it? Toggles. The privacy policy, what is it? It's text. So it didn't seem really appealing, but I changed my mind about that because when I first started working on a privacy-focused product, I realized that privacy and security they cross over so many different areas of web development, and this is kind of what I would like to share with you today as well. Right, so this will be all trip around web privacy. So we'll talk a little bit about cookie banners, about permissions, privacy options, then user agent and testing over there. And what I would like you to walk away with are concrete tips and things you can do today on your web application to improve both privacy and user experience. And now, before we start on our little journey, I want to kind of lay some groundwork. First of all, I was asked to add that this talk contains 0% legal advice, just so you know. And second, I just want to share with you a few key definitions that we're going to need later. So let's do this now so that it's out of the way. First, cookies, specifically third-party cookies. So third-party cookies are the ones we care about most in privacy land because they are the ones from domains other than what's displayed in the URL bar. So a first-party cookie over there, typically this could be a session cookie. And a third-party cookie, it could be set by a third party on your site. And these, they have very legitimate use cases, but they can also be used to track users across sites. And third-party cookies can be used for cross-site tracking, but they're not the only techniques. There are other techniques. One of these is fingerprinting. We'll talk about that, but I just wanted to give you a brief overview. And for this reason, both third-party cookies and fingerprinting technique are being restricted in browsers. One last piece of introduction. So to kind of use as a red thread in this talk, we're going to use this example demo application, which is like fictional. So let me introduce you to Super Trip Planner, which is a little example web app where I can enter my future trips so I can get an overview of what's planned. For each trip, the web app is going to also display a little map so I can get an idea for the place beforehand. I can also get recommendations for nearby trips. This is kind of a questionable feature, but you'll see why I added that here. This is why location is requested here, as you can see. And hard to miss, big cookie banner. Well, because I'm using a session cookie, but I'm also using a few third parties. Some of these need to set cookies, so this is why I had to add this cookie banner here. Oh yeah, finally, Super Trip Planner, it says it embeds video to give tips to users from fellow travelers and how to best use the application. And I can also share a link to Super Trip Planner for my friends who may be interested. So it's very basic. It's actually, of course, unusable for actual trip planning, as you can probably already see, but it's a good demo for today because this web application, it does a few things that may seem familiar to you, that many web applications do, but that have an overlap with privacy, and that can hurt both privacy and UX if they're not done right. Right, so our intro is set up. We're all set up to get started on our trip, and our first stop has to be about cookie banners. So cookie banners. Nobody loves them. I know I don't, but they are the way user consent is requested today in many web applications. And maybe you have your own consent system in-house, but it's also very common to rely on third-party solutions because it can be a hassle to maintain your own consent management solution. So a third-party consent manager works like this. You would sign up on the provider sites. There are a bunch. So here for this demo, I'm using CookieBot. Another common one is CookieYes. Maybe you've seen that as a user when you're browsing sites. Then you would enter your config, your domain name, your cookie banner settings, the text you want, and so on. And then the provider is going to scan your domain to detect cookies, and it's also going to give you a script. And then you insert your script, that script into your page, and then magic happens. The cookie banner, because the consent provider has actually been scanning your site. The cookie banner is going to be displayed and also display here. If you would click on the details, you would see the actual cookies that are set on your site by yourself or by third parties. So this is very convenient, but this can also affect user experience. Not just because the cookie banner is an interruption in the flow. I think we're all way too familiar with that. But also because cookie banners can cause what's called layout shifts. So this is one example of a layout shift. I don't know if you're familiar with that kind of situation. It can be really annoying. So this happens when the page layout is going to change unexpectedly, and then you end up doing something that you did not intend to do. So this can be very bad for user experience. And there's actually a metric for you to measure the impact of layout shift on user experience. Does someone here maybe know what that metric is called to measure layout shift? Almost. It's the same abbreviation. So it's.
It's CLS.
Yeah, it's CLS, exactly. So that's right. Well done. This is CLS, cumulative layout shift, because it's accumulation. But you're right about the name of that metric. So what you want is you want to keep your CLS low, that is below 0.1, if possible. And to do that, you want to avoid top of screen cookie banners like this one that's sliding, right? Because you can see here, the whole web application actually it shifts down. Probably you can see on the picture. So the cookie banner is here. It's inserted into the DOM after the page has rendered, and it's going to push other elements down the page, and boom, we have a layout shift. So here, my CLS that I measured, it was nearly 0.3, which is in the orange zone. It's like not good. So what I did is then I went to my cookie consent provider and checked out the options available for me in terms of position. And you can see it's really straightforward. I just have to pick the right option. So here I decided to go for bottom. So it's a footer banner. And then if we calculate again, the layout shift is going to be 0, which is much, much nicer, at least for that page. So this is my CLS score after making this simple change. And in case you're wondering, here I picked the footer option. If I had picked the modal option, my CLS would also look good. I just picked footer because it's less obtrusive. And it also does not compete for attention with other elements on top of page. For example, if you have, permission request plus a cookie banner as a model is kind of a lot happening in the middle of the screen. So that's why I picked footer, but this is kind of more of a UX and, product decision you would have to make. All right, in case you're wondering, I use the DevTools Perf Insights panel to measure my layout shift. Layout shift CLS is also a core Web Vital metrics. So it's a set of metrics to measure user experience on your page. We don't have time to dive into this right now, but I just wanted to let you know that here are links to these resources in case you're interested in having measurable ways to look into user experience. All right, this doesn't change the fact that cookie banners are annoying. There's another thing on Supertrip Planner that was kind of a little annoying. When I landed on the page, I don't know if you saw that. It was kind of small, but there's also a location permission request. When I land on the page is asking, hey, can I, Supertrip Planner wants to know your location. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's say that here in our demo site, as I mentioned, we have a feature to show to the user nearby trip ideas. And this is why we're requesting permission to the user. Maybe you're wondering, okay, what's the connection actually between a permission request and privacy? Well, in that case, it's location, so it's kind of the connection is pretty straightforward. But the other thing is the way permissions work at the moment, they can feel a little intrusive. It's like you're landing on it's a little bit like if you were meeting someone for the first time and they ask you, the first question they ask is, where do you live? It's a little weird. It's not very pleasant, and it's kind of a, bad user experience for people visiting your site for the first time. I think we can relate to that as users as well. So intrusiveness is kind of also a form of privacy violation, or can be perceived like that for users. So this is kind of exactly what we're doing here, right? In Supertrip Planner, we land on the page and the page is requesting your location. So it's completely out of context, and what will happen here is that most likely the user will be annoyed. And it's also likely they will not grant permissions here because they have zero context. So that means this doesn't even give me a chance as an engineer to kind of give them a nice feature in exchange for the annoyance. So it's a bit of a lose-lose situation we have here. Why am I saying that the permission is likely going to be declined? We have some data on that. So this is for Chrome on Windows. So for that specific study for Chrome on Windows, 85% of location permission requests or permission requests in general were either blocked, dismissed, or ignored. So this is a huge percentage, right? And it means it's a good occasion to stop here and think and see if we have a chance to change that. So one good practice for location for permission requests is to request them in context. So there's an example here. I don't know the underlying, how Google search actually determines when to do what, but I thought it was interesting to notice that depending on the search, if my search, adds some context by location, only in that case, I'm going to be, my location is going to be requested. In which case, here it makes sense for me that Google search actually needs my location to, give me the best answers. So that's an example of requesting permission in context. So here what we could do for a Supertrip Planner, instead of requesting location on page load, we could think of having a button, that when I click upon it, this is going to show me trip ideas nearby. And only when the user clicks that button, we're going to come in and request location. In which case, the likeliness is higher that the user is going to actually grant location permission in that specific case, because they will understand why the app is asking for this permission in that moment. There's a bigger question to ask here about, okay, for this specific product, do we actually need location? Because when you start asking for location data, you enter a whole realm of complexity. You're going to have to be, to treat that data as private. So this just adds some engineering complexity. And this is a product question to ask, is this feature, used enough and worth it that we actually want to come in and ask the users for their location? But that's for another day. I just wanted to kind of hint on that. So with this, we've covered permission requests, and we're ready to move on. And I would like to tell you a little bit about what we called here privacy options. So you remember earlier we were talking a little bit about the third-party consent provider solution, which it's really convenient, right? The setup, as you saw, it's pretty easy. So it means I can rely on other developers' expertise and domain expertise on consent management, and just use their solution as is. So third parties are very useful building block for us engineers, but they do come at a cost. And as mentioned, when you include a third party into your web application, you have to trust them, because if we are thinking about third party scripts, for example, that you add into your page, they get so much power. They can do pretty much anything on your page or many things. So you have to be careful about who you decide to include. So that's one first layer of decision you have to make when you include a third party into your page. But the second bit is privacy. So sure, you would not just include any third party into your page. You need to kind of go ahead and vet them. But there's a little bit more nuance to that. Once you've picked a third party that does what you like, for which the pricing is okay, and the feature set looks reasonable for what you want to achieve, it's a good idea to actually take a look at the privacy options available to you. Let's see. Here's one example. So if you remember, we have one video that's embedded into Supertree Planner. You actually, so here we're using YouTube to embed that video. When you embed a video from specifically it's YouTube in that case, you actually have an option to enable privacy enhanced mode. And what this means is that in that case, if you activate that mode, I'm reading the doc, it says, with this mode, views of embedded YouTube content will not influence the viewer's browsing experience on YouTube. So it means if a user sees that video and then later goes to YouTube, whatever they saw on your site is not going to impact what they see on YouTube. So it's not a must, and personalization on YouTube, it can be desirable, but it's good to know this option exists. And this is what this section is about. I'm going to go a little faster here because we're at time. Yeah, let me just move on. Analytics can also be considered. It's also a third party when you use typically, for example, Google Analytics. Same thing, there are options at your disposal. So my point is not really here the exact third parties we're discussing, but just when you select a third party to do what you want, check the privacy options that are available to you, because maybe it's just activating a toggle and it gives your users more privacy. All right. So we talked a little bit about privacy options, and I want to move on to our next station, which is user agents. Maybe I can stop here. And how many of you are familiar with the user agents tree? Okay, a few. Oh, great. Perfect. Okay. So if you remember, on our demo site, we have this little share button here. Okay. And so in order to make it work, what I'm using here in my demo is the Web Share API. And with this API, what users can do is they can share links and text to other applications like WhatsApp that are installed on their device. So when I tap this button, this is what this looks like in my Android device. So if you're an Android user, this UI is going to look familiar to you. And on iOS, the UI for that is going to look iOS-like. So again, this API right there offers a native-like experience from within a web application. So it can be nice to consider. What is interesting, however, for our section is not really the Web Share API itself, but it's more the button here. So you see, we're on Android here, and the icon here is going to be Android-like. So because the API, the Web Share API, is going to allow users to share content in a way that is native, it would be a nice touch, a nice user experience to also respect each platform's icon design. So I would like to have the right icon from within each platform on that button. So, here, if I'm on iOS, I'm going to want to have this icon over there. On Android, this one in the middle, and this is for Windows, I think. Don't hate me if this is not right. So in order to achieve that, what I want to do is I want to assess what platform the user is on, and I want to set my icon dynamically depending on the platform. So first step is to assess what platform the user is on. So how would you do that? How would you know what platform the user is on?
User agent.
Great, user agent. Perfect. But there's a little more to that. So what I'm doing here is it's a very simple parsing of the user agent, indeed, to kind of assess what platform the user is on. And here I'm just parsing the user agent to detect the platform. And this works out fine, but we actually have a bit of a problem here. And DevTools is actually going to complain a little bit about that. Maybe you've seen that one before, maybe not. So this is where we kind of have a bit of a rabbit hole here. I'm gonna try and go fast on that one, but the user agent string, which you can see here as an example, it contains a lot of information. It actually contains too much information. Because the user agent string, when it's combined with the set of fonts you've installed, for example, the way your browser is going to render some canvas elements and so on, all of these, there are bits of information that are, kind of, that can be unique for one user. So all of these bits of information, they will remain somewhat stable for one user over time, but they can vary a lot across users. And because of this, all of these elements combined, they can create what we call a browser fingerprint, which is kind of a unique fingerprint of you as a user when you browse the web. And this can be very useful for use cases like fraud detection, which is an important use case, but it can also be used for tracking users across sites without their consent. You can try it out with this demo. I mean, don't do this at home, but you can try out in this demo how easy it is. This uses fingerprint.js2, which is a common NPM package to do fingerprint detection. So it takes all of these elements and it calculates a hash, and this is unique-ish for that specific user. So users can be crossed across sites like that. Because of this, browsers, and Chrome specifically, is gradually reducing the amount of information that's in the user agent string to kind of make that harder. So initially, the user agent string in Chrome looked like this for a Samsung phone. And ultimately, after this process of gradually reducing the amount of information that's in the user agent string, the user agent is going to look like this. So you can see that some pieces of data will stay, important bits like, the platform, for example, this is Linux here, or the major browser version. It's useful to know what browser version the user is on. But some other bits will go away. So any data that can make you too unique, for example, the detailed version number of the browser you're currently using, the exact device model name. This is, for example, this is what my phone is. The exact platform number. All of these are going to change. So here, K is actually going to be static. It's always going to be K, no matter what device you're on. So because of this user agent gradual reduction, it's a good idea to adopt the new way in Chrome to access user agent data, and it's called navigator.user agent data. And maybe you can see here one big upside of that data is it's way more structured. So user agent, you kind of have to parse it manually or use a library to do that, but there's like some work to do to make it readable. And this data over here is much more structured, and it's easier to access the information you're looking for. I'm going to move on because I think we're a bit short on time. Sorry about the flashing. Okay, moving on. Another rabbit hole. And one last note on testing. As browsers are changing their approach to privacy and also adding more measures to protect user privacy, it's a good idea to consider adding incognito browsers to your testing suite. We usually test across browsers, but how does your site behave in incognito? It could be a good thing to test for. We don't need that. Potentially could be a good idea depending on what browsers are common for your users to be using. You may want to test your application in Brave and DuckDuckGo and other more browsers that have privacy in the headline. It could be interesting to see how your site behaves there. And very interesting, I just wanted to mention, let me just go through this. This is something my colleague Thomas posted on Twitter a few weeks ago. I thought it was interesting. He saw a bug report for his little web application. I block cookies by default. Your website doesn't handle that nicely. Someone blocks cookies by default, maybe session cookies are blocked. So this kind of makes sense that some things are not going to work. But interestingly, the website doesn't actually need cookies to operate, but still it breaks when cookies are deactivated. So what happened here? Big suspense. Blocking cookies also blocks local storage. I mean, we can discuss on whether or not this should be expected behavior, but this is actually what happens at the moment. So I thought that was quite interesting. And I think the call to action for you here is to add some error management within local storage. And if this is something you can add to your test suite, check out how your site behaves when cookies are blocked. There are many interesting things in this article, so you can check out Thomas' article for details on that. And with this, reaching the end of the journey, so I just want to pause and wrap up. I'll post the slides from Twitter, so if you're interested, just follow me there. And I'm going to be hanging out here after this talk, so I'd love to talk about privacy or about, I don't know, nice suites I should try in Stockholm. So please come and say hi.
Thank you.